Divorced people. What was the final straw? After 2 dice, multiple relapses, and a separation, we decided to work things out. I had to take my friend out of town to buy a car and told my husband I'd be home around 6. I was very excited to be early and surprise him. As I turned down our block at 5, I noticed his car coming down the block. Stopped one house early and tossed something in the dumpster. I waited momentarily till he pulled into the garage, then drove up to the dumpster. It was a beer can he tossed. He was drinking and driving with our kids after all of that. Came in and immediately tossed him out. When one friend privately tells you they are concerned for your health and safety, you dismiss them and adamantly defend your spouse. When 5 friends individually tell you they are scared for you, then you start to listen and to accept an uncomfortable truth. He was so selfish for years and made excuse after excuse for it. But he always put me last. I was ready to leave him, but we made one last big push to make it work. We did a lot of things together that I had been wanting forever. One of them was getting scuba certified. On our first big dive with a group after certification, he jumped out of the boat while I was still getting ready. The dive leader screamed at him and shamed him for abandoning his dive partner. Warned him how unsafe it was for both of us, and just really laid into him. Finally I get into the water and we begin our descent. We get to 30 foot down and I can't get my ears to clear. I signal to him that I need a moment to get acclimated before going any deeper. He sees what's happening but just takes off, leaving me behind. I went back up to the surface because now I'm basically just alone in the middle of the Caribbean and can't catch up with the group. At some point the dive leader figures out what happened and lost his shit on my husband. Refused to let him get back in the water because leaving your dive partner in a potentially life or death situation is apparently a no-no. Really made me wake up to the truth that he would never be there for me. Not ever. Not even for 2 minutes while I adjusted to the water depth. He would always choose his own selfish interests and leave me to figure it out on my own. Left when we got home. Got married to my ex-husband at 17 and was married for 20 years with 3 kids. He always had anger issues, but after 10 years of marriage he started to become physically abusive to me, although never in front of our kids. I didn't leave BC, the abuse was borderline. He never punched me in the face or anything like that. He would push me down, grab me by the back of my hair, etc. One day I'm laying in bed with our youngest, who was 3 years old at the time. My ex comes rushing into the room, grabs me by my ankles and swiftly pulls me off the bed onto the ground. I had been laying on my stomach, so when I landed on the floor my face smacked into the ground, so I started crying hysterically. My 3-year-old was still on the bed and not only became hysterical as well but also ran to his dad and started attempting to punch him in an effort to protect me. It was absolutely heartbreaking. I'm ashamed to say I didn't leave at that time. My son was 3 and I thought he would forget about the abuse he saw. My ex was always remorseful and agreed to start individual therapy as well as medication, which he did. The medication really seemed to be helping. However, about 6 months later my 3-year-old son randomly tells the story of seeing his dad attack me to my parents. This was the first time he ever mentioned it and I was really surprised he still remembered it. That was the last straw for me. When I realized my son was never going to forget what happened that day. He's almost 9 now and he still remembers it. Edit. Wow, you guys are so amazing. Thank you so much for all the love and support. I never had an ounce of support from anyone while the kids and I were going through this. I had made my parents aware of the abuse long before my son told them that story. My mom's words were, "I think you should just feel lucky you found someone who will tolerate you." And another time, "Well, since you're not really hurt, I think calling the police would be dramatic." But you have always loved painting yourself as the victim. Even our marriage counselor never once took me aside and said, "OP, you need to get out of this marriage." He was insistent that we could manage our issues, abuse and all, successfully. All of my kids and I did go to counseling. All the kids took the split really hard. My older son, who was 15 at the time, started self-harming and using Xanax. I was extremely lucky to have gotten him into a great program. He spent 6 weeks in a mental health facility rehab, followed up with therapy once he got home, and still goes to therapy to this day. He is absolutely thriving now at 20 years old. All my kids seem very well adjusted at this point. I have been to therapy as well, but actually have my first EMDR therapy session scheduled for next month. As far as thinking my son would forget at 3 years old, I realize now that was an ignorant assumption to make. I myself have very early memories even before 3 years old, but I was always under the impression that for males, memories typically started around the age of 5. It never occurred to me that being so traumatic it would obviously be stuck in his mind forever, but now that it's been pointed out to me, it makes perfect sense. Thank you all so much for your positivity and compassion. Thank you for taking the time to comment and share your own stories. The day my 2-year-old said, "Shut up, bitch," to me, I had endured 10 years of abuse in my marriage, but hearing my innocent child repeat his father's words was enough for me. I called a lawyer the next morning, being pushed down the stairs so hard that I had splinters up and down my arms from trying to catch myself on the wooden rails. Multiple broken ribs the time. My brand new laptop I just got for school smashed on the sidewalk. Found crack in his tool belt in the shed. All within about 48 hours. Edit. Thanks for the kind comments and messages, guys. Guess I'll add this as well. After I left, he ended up with a new girlfriend very quickly who was also into drugs and, according to his daughter, absolutely batshit. She caught him cheating on her and waited in his bed for him to get home after seeing the other woman. She had a gun and shot him. It only went through his hand though, so I really wonder if he learned his lesson or not. For years I was the only one putting any effort into our life goals or raising our kids. I felt like he was my third most idiotic child since I did everything for him, up to filling out employment paperwork and making his doctor appointments, while not receiving any kindness or acts of love in return. A month before our 5th anniversary, I told him that if he wanted to do something, he would need to plan it. I was exhausted. You see, every year I did so much for our anniversary. I booked the same honeymoon suite we'd had on our wedding night at the same romantic bed and breakfast. I'd arrange for a babysitter, research and make reservations at a different fancy restaurant each time, packed his bag, usually buying him new clothes too, packed my bags, obviously, bought gifts, made sure he was off work early, etc. Everything, honey. I reminded him a week ahead of time that I wasn't planning anything this year. I woke up the day of our anniversary knowing he had made no plans. Would he throw something together last minute? Give me a gas station gift? Offer another back rub that turned into coerced sex? Who knows? I said I wasn't planning anything, so I waited. He came home from work and complained about not having good food for dinner, so we went grocery shopping. In the checkout line, at 8 p.m., he turned around with a surprised fucking look on his face and said, "Shit, today is our anniversary, isn't it?" He didn't even remember until that very moment. God, I felt so small, so insignificant. So very used and discarded. And then I felt every ounce of hope and love I had left for him disappear. It simply evaporated. Gone. "Yes, it is," was all I said. He turned back around after laughing and saying, "Lol. We both forgot." Nope. We didn't. You did, again, like always. and I had the obvious realization that we're not in an equitable relationship. I'm just your full-time mommy that you get to fuck. I was not treated like a loved and wanted human being at all. I left him after I got my ducks in a row about 6 months later. Mom left my father when she caught him uploading a naked picture of himself to a pornographic site. She said she watched him for a good 2 or 3 minutes before he noticed her. I can't help but laugh anytime I think about the absurdity of it. I went on a weekend trip with my mom to a town on the coast that has a casino and outlet mall. I'm notoriously frugal, so my mom enticed me with a free hotel room. Cool, that just leaves food. I gave myself $20 to spend at the casino and had zero plans to buy anything at the mall. Well, that $20 turned into $860. So I paid for our hotel room and food, and bought some wardrobe staples at the outlet mall. I went home with $230 remaining, less my gas money. Not too bad, right? Well, my ex-husband flipped out when he saw that I had bought some clothes. He started yelling about how we needed to put together a budget, because our spending was out of control. But a reminder, I'm very frugal. It was his 4-6 lattes a day, breakfasts and lunches out, and iTunes addiction, plus the $60 each he gave his 3 kids each week to buy their lunches at fast food places instead of the school cafeteria that were bleeding us dry. Never mind the random expensive stuff his kids regularly asked for. But despite that, he just wouldn't stop yelling at me about needing to budget, and he had me backed into a corner, physically. He would not listen when I pointed out that I actually made a profit that weekend. He stormed out to go pick up the kids from their moms, so I decided to distract myself to calm down. I broke out my laptop and created a spreadsheet on Excel to chart expenses and analyze where we could make cuts, etc. Logged into our bank account online to start charting the spending for the last 6 months, and what do I see? $600 in ATM withdrawals and a credit card charge of over $900 to a very classy establishment named the Boom Boom Room, all on the first night I was gone. The ATM he used, thankfully, our bank so no fees, was located near the club. I decided to just input the charges on my little spreadsheet along with everything else, and gave it the header, strippers. He was taking his sweet time coming home, he took the kids out to eat, budget be damned, so I put together a basic budget and highlighted on essential expenses to discuss and try to find ways to cut down. I broke those expenses down by mine, his, and ours, which definitely confirmed the source of the problem. That night, after he'd returned home and the kids were sleeping, I broke out the laptop and pulled up my spreadsheet. It took a minute, but he eventually saw the strippers entry. He immediately denied it, said we must have been hacked. So I said, great, then we need to shut down the cards, notify the authorities, and request help from the bank. He soon caved, and claimed that he'd called his buddy to go out, and the buddy chose the location, which he thought was just a bar, and the buddy was going to bring the guitar he was selling for $600 cash. He took out money, but then his buddy stood him up. By then, he was drinking and got conned into buying really expensive booze for the girls flirting with him, who he wasn't tipping at all, as he didn't realize it was a strip club. He gave the club his cash to pay part of the bar tab, then charged the rest. Sure, right. He tried to play victim and say that he was just so embarrassed about being tricked that he snapped when he saw I spent money. He panicked, thinking we'd go into the negative. Like, dude, you went to a strip club. Own it. I don't give a crap if you go to one. What I do care about is not setting boundaries on what you'll spend, then refusing to take accountability when you overdo it. And to then corner me physically while you scream at me after you screw up. Hell no. We'd been having problems already, but that flipped the switch for me. I moved out a week later and our divorce was finalized a mere 9 days after we filed. Screw those mind games. At our second round of marriage therapy, the therapist asked him, "What nice thing can you do with your wife?" He replied, "She can help me gap the spark plugs in a Durango and rewire the boat trailer." After 40 years of marriage, I decided right then and there that I still had some years left to live and I was going to live them without him. Not me, but one of my best mates got divorced. They'd been obviously unhappy for a while, so it wasn't a complete surprise. I asked him exactly this question and he answered. She was out with a couple of male coworkers. I began wondering if she was fucking them. Then I realized that I didn't even give a shit if she was. That was when I knew I felt absolutely nothing for her anymore. Even the prospect of her fucking other guys didn't hurt or upset me. I guess that's different from most other stories here. There was no one big bang moment of abuse or threats or betrayal that stunned him into action. It was just a realization that she no longer meant a thing to him. Made a poor financial decision which almost led to us getting evicted. He did not tell me until he figured it out. However, he discussed the matter with people at work. He also had extreme anger issues and drank a lot. The final straw was when my 7YO told me he no longer felt safe with him and did not want to be nice to him because of how mean he was to me. He got his second DUI with our daughter in the car. I filed 3 days later. You can fuck up your life and you can fuck up my life, but never hers. The kids were mine to raise and not his. One day I was in the postpartum trenches and just needed an hour to myself to shower for longer than 2 minutes, eat something and just relax without someone eating something. I told him how badly I needed a break. He said okay, but then made some excuse to run an errand. 3 hours later he still wasn't home and I found out from my SIL when I texted her to ask if she'd seen him. He was ignoring my calls that him and his brother went golfing. He would drive drunk all the time and was a mama's boy with a totally evil and enmeshed mom who blamed me for everything, including her baby boy's drunk driving. Well, did you put your foot down and tell him not to? You need to make sure he doesn't do that. A lady, I've tried. He came home from golf and I blew up. Ended up with me and the kids barricaded in our room while he was screaming outside the door. He kicked the door down and scared the shit out of my babies. I caught a glimpse of us all in the full-length mirror in our room and knew instantly this was done. The looks on my face and my little ones' faces as we were all huddled together on the bed looking up at this maniacal man who was screaming. He didn't care how upsetting this was to our kids, and that image of us in my brain just instantly killed our marriage. There was no going back. No surprise here, he hasn't been the most present and involved father since the divorce, but he gave me full custody of our kids and visits them consistently. He does love them and things have somewhat calmed down. I know he regrets his actions, but he just has to live with them now. He has a girlfriend who looks eerily similar to me and still to this day hints that he'd like to reconcile. Lol. One night, after manifesting another argument, he threw his ring at me screaming for a divorce, for the second time, and left the house. That night, I got the best night's sleep I'd had in months. Called our marriage counselor and my therapist the next morning to get their take. Both conversations were less than 5 minutes long and each said it was over. He was shocked when I served him papers, face rolling on the floor, laughing, woman shrugging. I finally realized that my kid was watching, found out he was doing meth after he threatened to kill me. Later he told me, I wasn't really going to do it, I just wanted to scare you. Also he said it was my fault he did meth because I didn't clean our apartment enough. Final straw was him being arrested for drunk driving and crashing into multiple parked vehicles. Definitely not the first time I'd had a call in the middle of the night from the police. There's so much more to the story, including infidelity and abuse. I didn't like his girlfriends when she cheated on me. I found out. We went to counseling. Meanwhile, I'm trying to save our marriage and she is still seeing him. I called his wife at her job to let her know my wife and her husband were still carrying on.